Before the rain, before the envelope, before everything changed, a woman in a gray janitor's uniform was mopping the same stretch of hallway she had mopped every Thursday night for 3 years. Her name was June Adler, and the only people who ever looked at her were the ones about to ask her to clean up something they'd spilled. The Hargrove Tower stood 42 floors above downtown Cincinnati, all glass and steel, and the kind of quiet arrogance that only money can buy. The lobby alone cost more to build than most people earned in a lifetime. There were 2 security desks, a fountain that ran even on Sundays, and a rotating door that moved so smoothly it felt like stepping into another world. June entered through the side entrance, the one without the fountain. She had been doing it so long she didn't think about it anymore. Badge in, cart out, headphones in. She moved through those offices the way water moves through cracks, noticed only when something goes wrong. That Thursday night in October, the building was nearly empty. It was past 9. The finance floors had cleared out by 7. The executive suites on 38 were dark. June pushed her cart off the elevator, plugged in her headphones, and started at the far end of the corridor like always. That's when she found it. Not a wallet, an envelope. It was lying flat against the baseboard near the emergency stairwell door, half tucked under the rubber weather strip, like it had slid out of someone's bag and gotten caught by the draft. Cream-colored, heavy stock, the kind of envelope that comes in a box you have to order specially. No stamp, no return address, just 3 initials pressed into the back flap in embossed gold. CRH. June picked it up. She turned it over. The flap wasn't sealed, just tucked. She could see the edge of something inside. Green, the unmistakable dark green of a cashier's check. She stood there in that empty hallway under the hum of the fluorescent lights, and she felt the weight of it in her hands. "This ain't mine." She said it out loud, to nobody, just to make it real. She was 41 years old. She had a daughter in the 8th grade named Brianna, who needed new glasses she'd been putting off for 2 months. She had a car with a cracked radiator hose that she'd been nursing since August. She had a box on her kitchen counter, the kind that comes in a plain white sleeve, that held her mother's last round of medication, the one the insurance had stopped covering in September. She could feel all of those things in her hands when she held that envelope. She looked up and down the hallway. No cameras on this stretch. She knew that because the maintenance crew had flagged the blind spot months ago and facilities still hadn't fixed it, no one would know. No one was coming. The building was as close to empty as it ever got. Nobody would know. The thought didn't come as a temptation. It came as a test, and June Adler recognized the difference. She tucked the envelope into the front pocket of her uniform, where she kept her badge and her chapstick and a folded photo of Brianna from 3rd grade, and she finished her shift. The next morning she Googled CRH Hargrove Tower, Cincinnati. The first result was a profile piece from the Cincinnati Business Courier, dated 18 months ago. There was a photo, a man in his 60s, silver-haired, the kind of face that looked like it had never been told no. The caption read, "Conrad Hargrove, founder and chairman of Hargrove Capital Management, photographed at the opening of the Hargrove Tower." The article called him one of the wealthiest private investors in Ohio. It mentioned a charitable foundation. It mentioned a second home in Vail. It mentioned 3 grown children and a late wife named Susan. June read the whole thing at her kitchen table while Brianna ate cereal across from her and asked what she was reading. "Something for work," June said. She thought about calling the building's main line and leaving a message. She thought about bringing it to the security desk and letting them handle it. Both felt like the right thing on the surface and wrong underneath. She'd seen how things got handled in buildings like that. Things disappeared. People shrugged. No one could say for certain what happened. She didn't have a direct number. She didn't have an email. What she had was a name, a tower, and a Thursday morning off. So she went. She dressed carefully. Not to impress. She didn't own anything impressive, but to be taken seriously. Black slacks, the white button-down she kept for church and job interviews. Her good flats, the ones without the worn heel. She rode the bus downtown because the radiator hose wouldn't survive 2 round trips in the same day. The rotating door moved silently when she walked through the front entrance this time. The security guard at the main desk was young, mid-20s, blonde, with the particular look of someone very comfortable with small authority. His name tag said Derek. "Can I help you?" His eyes moved from her face to her clothes and back again. I'm here to return something to Mr. Hargrove. Conrad Hargrove. I work in the building, night maintenance, and I found something of his last night. Derek's expression didn't change. Mr. Hargrove doesn't see walk-ins. I'm not a walk-in. I work here. I found something on the 38th floor. You can leave it at the desk. We'll make sure it gets to the right person. June looked at him. She thought about the envelope, the weight of it, the 3 gold initials. She thought about how things get handled. I'd prefer to return it directly, ma'am. The word landed flat. That's not how it works. She stood there for a moment. She didn't argue. She didn't plead. She just said, "Could you at least let his office know I'm here? Tell them it's about a cream-colored envelope found near the stairwell on 38. They'll know what it is." Derek gave her a look that said he was doing her a favor and picked up the phone. He spoke quietly, nodded once. "Set the phone down. Someone will be down in a few minutes," he said, and his voice was different now. "Careful. You can wait over there." The woman who came down wasn't an assistant. She was maybe 50, in a charcoal blazer, with reading glasses pushed up on her head, and the walk of someone who had stopped tolerating nonsense sometime in her 30s. She introduced herself as Margaret, and she shook June's hand with both of hers. "You found it." "Yes, ma'am." "Where?" "Near the emergency stair door on 38. It had slid under the weather strip. I almost didn't see it." Margaret exhaled. It was the exhale of someone who had been holding their breath for 14 hours. "Mr. Hargrove has been in meetings since 7 this morning. He had a closing scheduled for today. This was part of it." She paused. "Can I ask, did you open it?" "The flap was already open," June said. "I saw enough to know it wasn't mine." Margaret looked at her for a long moment. Then she said, "He'll want to thank you himself. Do you have somewhere to be?" "No, ma'am." "Then come up." The elevator to 38 was different from the one June used for her cart, quieter. The floor numbers didn't light up in red. They glowed a soft amber. There was no hum, just a smooth, almost imperceptible rise. Margaret walked her down a corridor that June had mopped dozens of times and into a conference room she had never been inside. Floor-to-ceiling windows. The city spread out below like something someone had planned. Con Hargrove was already standing when they walked in. He was taller than his photo, broader. The silver hair was real, not the groomed kind, but the kind that came in on its own terms. He was holding a pair of reading glasses in one hand, and when he saw June, he put them down on the table. "You're the one who found it?" "Yes, sir." He nodded once, slowly, the way people do when they've processed something and come out the other side. "Margaret tells me you work nights here. 3rd floor cleaning crew, night maintenance." "Yes, sir. I rotate floors." He looked at her the way very few people in that building had ever looked at her, like he was actually seeing her. Not her uniform, not the cart she pushed. Her. "That envelope," he said, "contains a certified check for $800,000. It's the earnest deposit on an acquisition we've been negotiating for 11 months. If it had gone missing, we couldn't have closed today." He paused. The deal would have fallen apart. June stood still. She hadn't looked inside. She had felt the check. She hadn't read the number. $800,000. She thought about Brianna's glasses, her mother's medication, the radiator hose. She thought about how she stood in that empty hallway and said, out loud, "This ain't mine." "I'm glad I found it when I did," she said. Conrad Hargrove looked at her for a long moment. "What's your name?" "June Adler M. Adler." He said it like it meant something. "I'd like to ask you a few questions, if you don't mind. Not about the envelope. About you." She had not planned for that. She answered honestly, the way she answered most things, without decoration. She told him she'd been with the cleaning crew for 3 years, that she'd moved to Cincinnati from Lexington when Brianna was a toddler, following a job for her then-husband that hadn't worked out and neither had he, that she'd been doing nights because the hours let her be home when Brianna left for school in the morning. He asked her what she did before the cleaning crew. She told him she'd done office work, data entry mostly, some administrative support for a shipping company in Lexington. She'd taken a few community college courses before life got in the way. He asked her if she liked the work she was doing now. She was quiet for a moment. "It's reliable," she said. "That's not what I asked." She looked at him. "No," she said, "I don't." He nodded again, that slow, considering nod. "Mrs. Adler, my facilities director, has been trying to fill a property operations coordinator position for 6 weeks. It's a day shift, 43 hours a week, benefits on day 1. He slid a business card across the table. "If you're interested, Margaret will get you an application before you leave today." June looked at the card. She didn't pick it up right away. "Why?" she said. Conrad Hargrove raised an eyebrow. "Why? Me?" she said. "You don't know me." "I returned an envelope. That's all I did." He was quiet for a moment. "Then, my wife Susan grew up poor. Her father worked 3 jobs. She always said that the most revealing thing about a person isn't what they do when someone's watching. It's what they do in an empty hallway." He looked at the card on the table between them. "I've been looking for that kind of person for a long time." June reached out and picked up the card. She didn't take the job that day. She went home, put the card on the counter next to her mother's medication box, and made dinner. She helped Brianna with homework. She sat on the back step after her daughter went to bed and drank her coffee and looked at the alley and the yellow light from the neighbor's porch. She had learned, a long time ago, not to trust things that came fast. But this was different, and she knew it was different, and the knowing sat in her chest quiet and warm like something she hadn't expected to feel again. She called the number on the card the next morning. Margaret answered on the second ring. The application process took 2 weeks. Background check, references, an interview with the facilities director, a compact, businesslike man named Mr. Okafor, who asked her precise questions and wrote her answers down in a notebook with a black pen. He told her at the end of the second interview that she had the job. She started on a Monday. The first morning, she walked through the rotating front door with a badge that opened the elevator to 38. She stood in the lobby for a moment and looked at the fountain. The water moved in a slow, continuous arc. She had mopped the floor around that fountain hundreds of times and never once looked up at it. She looked at it now. 6 months later, Conrad Hargrove stopped by her office. She had an office now, small, with a window that looked out over the parking structure, but an office, and he set something on her desk. It was a brochure, a continuing education program at the University of Cincinnati, Business Operations Management, evening courses. "Completely optional," he said, "but if you're interested, the foundation covers tuition for full-time staff." She looked at the brochure. She thought about the community college courses she'd started in Lexington and left unfinished when everything went sideways. She thought about Brianna, who was 13 now, who had new glasses, who had started talking about high school, like it was something she was looking forward to. "Is this the part," June said, "where you tell me I've got unrealized potential?" Conrad Hargrove almost smiled. "Almost no. This is the part where I tell you that you're organized, you solve problems before I know they exist, and my last property coordinator had an MBA and wasn't half as effective." He nodded at the brochure. "The foundation doesn't offer tuition without reason." She picked up the brochure. She enrolled in the spring semester. She went on Tuesday and Thursday evenings, after Brianna was fed and the dishes were done, sitting in a classroom at the age of 41, with people who were mostly in their 20s, and one man in his 60s who told her, on the first night, that he was finishing something he'd started in 1987. She liked that man. His name was Theodore, and he brought a thermos of coffee and always sat in the 3rd row. She was not the best student in the room. She was not the worst. She read everything assigned. She turned everything in on time. She asked questions when she didn't understand, and she stayed after class twice to get clarity on concepts that she didn't want to fake her way through. By the second semester, 2 of her classmates were asking her to study with them. By the end of the first year, she had a 3.7 average and a letter of commendation from the program director. She didn't tell Brianna everything. Not at first. Kids that age could carry hope like a fragile thing, and June had learned to be careful with fragile things. But one evening in March, Brianna was at the kitchen table doing her algebra homework, and June was reviewing an operations report on her laptop, the kind of document she would have cleaned around 6 months ago, and Brianna looked up and said, "Ma, what are you doing?" "Work stuff. You're doing work at home now?" June looked up. Brianna was watching her with the particular expression teenagers have when they're noticing something they can't quite name. "Yeah," June said. "I guess I am." Brianna looked at her for another moment, then went back to her homework. But there was something in her face. Not surprise exactly. More like recognition, like she was filing something away. Good, June thought. File it. It was the following October, 1 year almost to the day from when she'd found the envelope, that everything shifted again. She was in a quarterly review meeting when Conrad Hargrove introduced her to a woman named Sylvia Odom, a partner at a commercial real estate firm that did significant business with Hargrove Capital. Sylvia was maybe 55, impeccably dressed, with the kind of handshake that said she'd earned everything in the room. "June manages our facilities operations across both towers now," Conrad said. "She's also most of the way through a business operations degree at UC. Sylvia looked at June. Not the way Derek at the security desk had. "The other way, do you have any experience with tenant coordination?" Sylvia asked. "Some," June said, "mostly on the operations side. I've been handling vendor contracts, maintenance scheduling, space planning for the last." "Could I take you to coffee?" Sylvia said. "Sometime this week?" June looked at her. "Why?" Sylvia smiled. "Because I'm expanding my team and I've been told the most revealing thing about a person is what they do in an empty hallway." June was quiet. Then she said, "He told you that." Sylvia glanced across the table at Conrad Hargrove, who was looking at something in his folder with the studied neutrality of a man pretending not to listen. "He might have mentioned it," Sylvia said. Coffee became 2 meetings. 2 meetings became an offer. The offer sat on June's kitchen counter for 4 days next to a now empty medication box. Her mother's prescription had been covered. Finally, by a supplemental plan, June had enrolled her in with the benefits from Hargrove Capital and the brochure from the University of Cincinnati, now dog-eared and marked with post-its. She took the offer. She took it not because it was bigger. It was, significantly, but that wasn't why. She took it because when she'd walked into that meeting room on 38 a year ago, she'd told Conrad Hargrove the truth. "I don't like what I'm doing." And the path from that room to this one had been nothing but the consequence of that honesty, compounding forward. She believed in consequences. She believed in what you carried in a dark hallway when no one was watching. She had always believed in that. It had just been a long time since believing in it had mattered. The morning of her last day at Hargrove Tower, she arrived early. She went down to the basement level, the service entrance, the one without the fountain, and she walked the night maintenance corridor one more time. The fluorescent hum, the rubber-wheeled carts lined up against the wall, the particular smell of industrial cleaner and old carpet and something underneath that she'd never been able to name. She thought about a woman in a gray uniform, mopping a hallway, earbuds in. She thought about an envelope half tucked under a weather strip. She thought about standing alone in the silence and saying, out loud to no one, "This ain't mine." She had not kept a single dollar that wasn't hers. And everything she had now, the office with the window, the business degree she was 2 semesters from finishing, the new job, her daughter's new glasses, her mother's medication, the radiator hose she'd finally had replaced. Every single bit of it had grown out of that one moment, that one choice in an empty hallway with no cameras and no witnesses and nothing to gain. She stood there for a minute, maybe 2. Then she took the elevator up, the main one, the quiet one, the one with the amber floor numbers. She watched the lobby appear below her through the glass, the fountain, the marble floor, the rotating door, and she stepped out on 38 one last time, picked up the box from her office, and walked to the elevator bank. Margaret was waiting. "I wanted to say goodbye properly," Margaret said. They shook hands. Margaret held on a moment longer than a handshake usually goes. "He's proud of you," she said. "He won't say it, you know how he is. But I'm telling you." June thought about Susan Hargrove, about a woman who had grown up poor with a father who worked 3 jobs, about someone who had looked at the world and decided that what happened in the quiet places, when no one was watching, when there was nothing to gain, was the truest measure of a life. "Tell him thank you," June said. "Tell him he was right about what he was looking for." She walked through the rotating door for the last time. The October air hit her face, cool, with that particular edge that meant the season was turning, that the summer's long, slow loosening was finally done, and something sharper was coming. She stood on the sidewalk outside Hargrove Tower with a cardboard box in her arms, and the city spread out in both directions, and she breathed it in. Behind her, the fountain was running. She hadn't stopped to look at it. She didn't need to anymore. She knew what it looked like. She knew what the whole building looked like now. Not from the outside, not the glass and steel and the money-bought quiet, but from the inside, from the night corridors and the conference rooms, and the elevator with the amber floor numbers, and the office with the window, and every floor in between. She had earned every inch of it. Not because someone had given her a chance. Because when no one was watching, she had been exactly the person she was when everyone was watching. That was it. That was the whole thing. There are Junes everywhere. People who show up. People who do the work no one notices. People who stand alone in empty hallways, holding things that don't belong to them, and make the right choice, and then walk back into their quiet, difficult lives, and think nothing of it. This story is for them. If you are a June, drop something in the comments. Tell us about a time you did the right thing when no one was watching. We read every single one. And if this story reminded you that honesty still matters, that integrity still pays out, that the right moment can find the right person, share this with someone who needs to hear it today. We'll be back next week with another story from Velvet Verdict. Until then, keep going.